It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Hey there, my fellow queens. Welcome back to another episode of the Hint Hive, where we're all about amplifying women's voices and owning our power. I'm your host, Kelly Hint, queen bee of this hive, and today we're diving into the juicy topic of bossing up your relationships. Buckle up because we're about to rule the hive like the queens that we are. All right, ladies of the hive, let's get down to business. First things first. What exactly are healthy relationships? Well, they're like a perfectly crafted hive, built on trust, communication, respect, and boundaries. Think of it as the ultimate girl gang where everyone's got each other's backs. Sounds great, doesn't it? But why should we care about healthy relationships anyway? Well, because they're the secret sauce to our happiness and success. Studies show that strong connections boost our mental and emotional well-being, empowering us to conquer anything that comes our way. So let's ditch the drama and make room for the good stuff. Now, I know it's easy to think only about romantic relationships as we discuss this topic, but I want you to keep in mind all of the relationships that you have in your life, whether it's with a romantic partner, your family, your friends, your coworkers. This applies to all of these relationships. Now let's talk red flags, shall we? We've all been there, stuck in toxic relationships that drain our energy and dim our sparkle. But fear not, ladies. By recognizing these warning signs early on, we can kick those unhealthy relationships to the curb and make room for relationships that lift us higher. As we begin discussing red flags, I think it's really important to keep in mind that this list is not exhaustive. There are a bunch more, I'm sure, that we can name. I'm just going over some of the very common ones. So the first one is lack of communication. This is where the person avoids discussing important topics or feelings or shutting down communication when conflict arises, kind of like the cold shoulder. And again, important to note that sometimes we all engage in some of these unhealthy means of communicating or lack of communicating. It's a red flag when it is a pattern, when it's frequent behavior, not just a one-off mistake kind of thing. And the next red flag, kind of common sense here, is disrespect. This is where the person is consistently disregarding your feelings, boundaries, or opinions. They make you feel less than. They make you feel like your opinion, your conversation, whatever it is that you have to say, that it just doesn't matter. I think we can all identify some people who have met that criteria in our lives. And this next red flag is a personal favorite of mine, control issues. This is where someone else tries to control your behavior, your choices, or your interactions with others. Now, I have to be real careful when I tread into this particular red flag because it is one of my biggest pet peeves ever. And unfortunately, it's one that is exhibited all throughout society, specifically in our government lately. Ladies, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. So I'm not going to go further into that discussion. I think we're all pretty aware of what this red flag looks like in romantic relationships, but I will briefly give some examples, such as when your romantic partner doesn't want you to be friends with a certain group of people, or your partner wants you to dress a certain way, or your partner tells you that you need to vote a certain way or think a certain way. But let's talk about what this looks like outside of romantic relationships. At work, it could be a boss who is a super duper micromanager with absolutely no reason to be a micromanager. They're just a control freak. There's a big difference. Like if you're not doing your job and you need to be spoken to, that's one thing. But this person, this manager, this authority figure at work that I'm talking about is the one that thinks that they need to have their hands in everything and they give you absolutely no sense of autonomy whatsoever. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that we can do about that, other than change jobs or attempt to report the person. That has not gone well for me in the past, I will say that. I'm usually retaliated against when I push back on control freaks. Who'da thunk it, right? And of course, we can have these unhealthy relationships with family members too. This is not just romantic partner, this is not just coworker or evil boss, so to speak. But our family members can be incredibly controlling. Think about if you are an adult and you are living on your own and your parents still think that they get to control you, dictate things, tell you how to live your life, tell you how to think. There's some problems there. And that's actually one of the things that I work on a lot in my coaching business is helping women be assertive with their family members, because let me tell you, there's a lot of dysfunction out there in families. And the next red flag is very common in romantic relationships, but it can happen in platonic relationships also. So this is jealousy and possessiveness. Definitely a big red flag here. So this is where the person shows excessive jealousy or possessiveness, monitoring your activities or your friendships. When thinking about it in platonic relationships, this is often that friend who gets pretty upset if you're hanging out with a different friend without them, or they think that you can't have any friends but them. And I'm not trying to dog on this person because quite often there are reasons behind it. I try to always look at these situations with as much compassion as I can muster up and try to figure out why this person is acting this way. For example, it could be that there are problems at home and they are really latching on to you and they have somehow made you the center of their world. It's not healthy. It really isn't. And that's something that does need to be addressed. The next red flag is lack of trust. So this is where the person is constantly suspicious of you. Quite often there are accusations without valid reason or refusing to trust you, again, with no valid reason. And again, I do say, I just feel like I need to emphasize this. A lot of times these red flags have a basis in fact. A lot of times people had to somehow figure out how to survive their current environment, and they developed a lot of these unhealthy behaviors along the way. So again, this is just me. It's the therapist in me really trying to find compassion for all people. But I am absolutely willing to admit that some people are just shitbags, and that's the end of it. All right, and the next red flag is the ever so popular gaslighting. For those who have been living in a cave and have never heard of this word, gaslighting is when somebody tries to manipulate you or distort reality to make you doubt your own perceptions or sanity. This is a huge red flag in romantic relationships with partners who tend to be emotionally abusive. Again, we'll get to that in a second. But gaslighting is a common theme in very unhealthy relationships. And also, again, not just romantic relationships. The boss who tells you to do something that you've done a million times already and they try to tell you that you haven't done it, or a parent who tries to rewrite history. You know, it's gaslighting. Or, okay, I will put a caveat in there. As far as memory goes, the older we get, the more things fall out of the back end of our memory. So maybe it is true memory issues and not gaslighting at times. I will concede to that. Not everything is gaslighting. All right, moving on to the next red flag, which is isolation. So again, this is another very common practice in unhealthy romantic relationships. This is where the person tries to isolate you from your friends, family, support systems, limits your independence. Quite often there's some financial abuse that happens in there. We'll get to that later on also. But I'm trying to think of a good example in like a platonic relationship, but I don't see that too often because there's usually not that level of control in a platonic relationship, unless it is a parent-child relationship and the parent is isolating the child from their friends and support, stuff like that. But usually when it comes to friendships, for example, isolation isn't as common. Now, moving on to emotional abuse. So this is when somebody regularly belittles, criticizes, or humiliates you, often using guilt and manipulation to control your behavior. Again, this is common in unhealthy romantic relationships, but also very, very common in unhealthy family systems. I see this quite often in both my therapy practice and my coaching business. Lots and lots of people have survived emotional abuse within their families. And also, let's be real. We can be emotionally abused at work too. How many of you have had coworkers or bosses who just scream at you, belittle you, make you feel like a piece of shit? You know, there's no need for that. If I screw up at work, you can talk to me like a human. You do not have to belittle me. That's, again, another hot button issue of mine. And this next red flag is, again, pretty common sense. Physical violence or threats. So any form of physical harm, including hitting, pushing, or threatening violence. Definitely a red flag. The next one, unwillingness to apologize or take responsibility. So this is where the person refuses to acknowledge their mistakes or they refuse to apologize for hurtful behavior. And I think I'm going to have to take a second here to collect myself so that I don't go off on a rant, because I really feel like people who refuse to apologize, people who refuse to take responsibility for their own actions, are some of the most incredibly emotionally immature humans on the face of this earth. For fuck's sake, people, own your shit. When you screw up, own it. Apologize for it and do better. It's not that freaking hard. Put your ego away and do the right thing. Be an adult. Okay, that's about as nice as I can be about that one. The next red flag we have is inconsistency or unreliability. So this is where the person frequently cancels plans at the last minute, breaking promises, or they're generally unreliable. This is common throughout the spectrum of relationships in our lives. This can be a romantic partner, obviously, who frequently cancels things, but also it's common among friendships, especially nowadays when people are so incredibly busy. If you feel like you've got a friend who's always canceling on you, have a talk with them. That's the very first thing to do before deciding that this is a red flag behavior and that you need to cancel them. Have a conversation first. Tell them that it hurts you that they do this and ask what's going on. It could be that they have paralyzing social anxiety and that's why they're canceling. So again, communication is really, really important here to make sure that you're not just labeling this as a red flag behavior without knowing the full story. Now, this next red flag behavior, I have a zero tolerance policy for, and I hope that you do too. This one is disregard for consent. This is when someone ignores your boundaries or pressures you into sexual activities against your will. And I will take it a step further and say it's not necessarily just about sex. When you say no to something, regardless of what it is, and somebody does not respect the word no, that is a problem. There are absolutely no excuses for this. So, like I said, for me, zero tolerance policy. The next red flag behavior is addiction or substance abuse. So this one's a tough one for me to talk about because I worked at an addiction clinic and I do not want to think about all of the people that I worked with being labeled as a red flag. So that's not what I'm saying here. So please do not judge people who struggle with addiction or substance abuse. They're fighting a fight that you can't imagine unless you have struggled with addiction yourself. As far as it being a red flag behavior, if the substance abuse issue negatively impacts the relationship or your well-being, then absolutely feel free to address it or exit the relationship. However, again, I'm not saying that somebody who has addiction issues needs to be labeled as something awful. It makes me really sad to even think about it, and it made me even uncomfortable listing it here as a red flag. But I think the important piece of this is if you are in a relationship with someone, whether a romantic relationship or friendship, and somebody has addiction issues, it is very, very important for you to know your boundaries and know what you can and cannot tolerate, what you will and will not tolerate, and set healthy boundaries around that. For example, it could look like, I want to give an example non-romantic relationship-wise. So let's say your father struggles with alcoholism and it affects your relationship significantly. Let's say he's abusive, verbally abusive to you, or physically abusive to you. That's a red flag. It's toxicity in the relationship, and you have every right to enforce healthy boundaries around that. You can say to him, Dad, I'm sorry, but I am not going to be around you when you're drinking. Or you could say, Dad, I don't think I'm comfortable having a relationship with you unless you decide to get help for what's going on. Again, I hope you understand what I'm saying here, the difference between a red flag and then like just labeling someone as a piece of crap. Please don't do that. The next red flag we're going to talk about is financial control. I see this very, very often in romantic relationships, in very unhealthy, abusive relationships. So it's very self-explanatory. This is where the person controls the finances, restricts your access to money, or uses financial dependence as leverage. Actually, I've seen parents do this a lot too with their adult children who are either still living with them or still on their health insurance or providing any kind of financial support. I've seen the parent try to control the person and basically blackmail their child, into complying with their wishes with the threat of taking money away or even cutting them out of the will. I've heard of that also. The next red flag is blaming others for problems. So again, this goes back to the person who is refusing to take accountability for their personal actions, and they're blaming others for the relationship issues. In healthy adult relationships, we take responsibility for our own actions, and we do not blame our actions on other people. All right, I'm climbing down off of my soapbox. Can you tell that it annoys the shit out of me when people don't take responsibility for their own actions? Okay, moving on. No more ranting. It's important to recognize these red flags that we talked about early on and take action to address them or reconsider the relationship if necessary. Ultimately, trust your instincts and prioritize your well-being in any relationship. including family. I don't know how many times I have had to work with people on pushing back against toxic relationships with family members. Just because you are related to them does not mean you have to have relationships with them. Now, I am not for, canceling every relationship that has negative qualities. No, because we're humans. We're all going to make mistakes. However, when it comes to your personal well-being and your mental health, do what you got to do. All right, enough with the negative. Let's discuss the green flags, which are positive signs indicating a healthy and nurturing relationship. So the first one is effective communication. This is when you're able to have open, honest, and respectful communication where both partners feel heard and understood. And not just partners. Again, this is, relationship with your aunt, your uncle, your cousin, your boss. If you can have open, honest communication, that is a healthy relationship. And the next one is mutual respect. So this is where you value each other's opinions, boundaries, and autonomy. And the next green flag is trust and transparency. This is where you can feel secure in the relationship with both people being honest and transparent about their feelings, their actions, and their intentions. There's no manipulation going on. There's no secrecy going on. It's just a nice, healthy, trustworthy relationship. All right, next one, supportive dynamics. This is where both people in the relationship offer emotional support, encouragement, and being each other's cheerleader in pursuit of goals and personal growth. I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be where I am at in my life without my husband's support. It's pretty amazing. I couldn't ask for a more supportive partner. And the next green flag is healthy conflict resolution. This is actually one of my most favorite things to work on when I do relationship coaching. I teach people how to fight nicely. I love it. This is where people are able to address their conflicts calmly and constructively, focusing on finding solutions rather than blaming or criticizing. And it's possible that I may do an entire episode on conflict resolution because people need to learn how to fight the right way. Okay, the next one is independence and interdependence. This is where both people in the relationship maintain their individual identities, interests, and friendships while also sharing a strong bond and mutual support. And because we're running out of time, I am going to move through these a little bit faster. The next one is shared values and goals. So this is where both people in the relationship align on important values, priorities, and long-term goals, which fosters a sense of unity and teamwork. And then, of course, this green flag is very important: empathy and understanding. So being empathic and understanding towards each other's feelings, perspectives, and experiences really makes relationships last. And they're meaningful, and they're healthy and supportive, and we all could use a little bit more empathy and understanding, especially in today's world. The next one is physical and emotional intimacy. And again, shockingly, this is not just romantic partners. So when you have this green flag, you feel comfortable and connected in both physical and emotional aspects of the relationship with mutual respect for boundaries. So this could be you like giving hugs and your BFF likes giving hugs too, and you are able to connect both physically and emotionally, not just about sex in romantic relationships or other types of relationships. All right, next one, encouraging growth. This is where two people support each other's personal development and growth and celebrate each other's achievements. And moving on to the next green flag, compromise and flexibility. This is where there's a willingness to compromise and find middle ground when any differences arise without sacrificing personal values or boundaries. We need to learn to be more flexible. My people with anxiety don't like this one. Because when we have anxiety, we like things a certain way, right? We get a little bit rigid because it reduces anxiety. But anyway, that's for another show. The next one is equal partnership. This is where two people in their romantic or platonic relationship share responsibilities, decision-making, and power dynamics equally without one partner dominating or controlling the relationship. If you've ever had an unhealthy friendship with someone, you know exactly what this feels like and looks like. And the next one is respect for boundaries. This is where two people honor each other's boundaries and consent and communicate openly about comfort levels in various aspects of the relationship. And again, I think this might be another one that is worthy of an entire podcast on its own, because I see lots of unhealthy boundaries floating around out there. The next green flag is healthy lifestyle choices. This is where two people encourage each other to maintain healthy habits, whether it's physical fitness, mental well-being, or overall lifestyle choices. We've all got that friend who we know is going to uplift us and encourage us to be the best versions of ourselves. We need more friendships like that. We need more relationships like that. And the final green flag is fun and enjoyment. This is where you're able to share laughter, joy, memorable experiences together, and all of this really fosters a sense of happiness and fulfillment in the relationship. And so recognizing these green flags can help affirm that you're in a supportive and fulfilling relationship where both partners in the relationship feel valued, respected, and loved. So how do we build these rock-solid connections and healthy relationships? Well, it's all about communication, my friends. Healthy communication means expressing yourself openly and honestly without fear of judgment. It's about active listening, validating each other's feelings, and finding solutions together. For example, in a healthy relationship, you might say, "I feel hurt when you cancel plans without notice. Can we work together to make our schedules more manageable?" These I statements are a staple in communicating with others effectively. On the flip side, unhealthy communication might involve passive-aggressive behavior, stonewalling, or manipulation. Remember, Queens, communication is the crown jewel of any relationship. Now, once you've built your dream hive, how do you keep it buzzing with love and positivity? Well, through self-care, self-love, and a whole lot of sass, my ladies of the hive. It is time to nourish your own soul, celebrate your wins, and slay those inner demons like the goddesses that you are. Do not settle for unhealthy, unfulfilling relationships. All right, Hive Queens, it's time to end with a daily dose of empowerment. Remember, you are fierce, you are fabulous, and you are worthy of nothing but the best in your relationships. So go out there and rule the hive like the unstoppable boss babe that you were born to be. And if you feel like you're struggling with your relationships, do not be afraid to reach out to a professional, such as myself, to get some help. And that's a wrap for today, my lovely listeners. Thank you for tuning in to the Hint Hive, Amplifying Women's Voices. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your fellow queens, and keep slaying those relationships like the bosses that you are. Until next time, stay fierce and stay fabulous.